Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. More than 125 million girls and women alive today have been subjected to a painful, violent, and terrifying ritual known as FGM, or female genital mutilation. Now, the centuries-old practice, which commonly involves removing all or part of the clitoris or sealing the vaginal opening, is most prevalent in Africa and certain parts of the Middle East. But health officials warn that large diaspora communities are at risk as well in the West, from the US to Canada to right here in Western Europe. Now, FGM has no medical benefits, nor is it prescribed by any religion. Yet superstition and deep-rooted cultural traditions have kept it going, often with horrible consequences. They range from infection, fatal bleeding, to complications in childbirth and mental health problems. Now, there's a new report out by UNICEF. It was issued in July. It covered some 29 countries over 20 years, one of the most comprehensive, if not the most comprehensive, analyses to date. Now, it says more girls around the world than ever before are saying no to FGM, and a growing number of communities are abandoning the tradition. But the report warns millions remain at risk. Now, my guest today is joining me from New York. She's Claudia Cappa. Claudia, you were the lead author. There were many people who wrote the report. You were the lead author of this study. And I'd like to basically ask you right off, the international community recognizes FGM, female genital mutilation, as a violation of human rights. It's a form of gender-based violence against girls and women. Your report says, nonetheless, 30 million girls, 3 million a year, are at risk of being cut in the next decade. What's driving this?
Sense of social obligation. We interviewed women and men in the 29 countries where the practice continued to persist. And we asked them, why do you think FGMC exists and why FGMC is such an entrenched practice? And they responded very clearly, because of social obligation. This is a tradition that has been in existence for centuries, and families and women in particular feel compelled to have their daughter cut because of social acceptance. This is what they think is expected of them from their communities, from their husbands, from their religion, even though FGMC is not a religious requirement.
And just to sort of build on what you just said, what's fascinating in the report, there was a video component to the report in which someone pointed out that sometimes two individual families may be against female genital mutilation. Neither of them believes in it, but they continue to do it because they see their neighbor doing it, and they haven't talked about it. They just haven't communicated. That's a major problem, you say.
It is a major problem. The report confirmed that in most of the country, the majority of women and men are against the continuation of the practice. But the report also highlights the fact that this is not something that is openly discussed. This opposition is very often unknown. Even within families, wives admit not knowing what their husbands think of the practice. And as a result, women tend to underestimate the proportion of men who want this practice to end. It is therefore important that we make this opposition to the practice visible through debate and discussions within communities and at the national level.
How do you do that? I mean, could you tell us a little bit concretely about the type of resources you need, on-the-ground resources, the type of programs that you need to see in place in order to make this opposition more clearly visible to the communities?
UNICEF has been very active with partners and local governments in promoting sort of community-based education programs that try to explain the dangers associated with the practice and try to facilitate discussion within communities about the effects of the female genital mutilation and cutting. This consists, for instance, in communities-based educational programs, but also simply opportunity for debate between men and women and between the young generation of girls and older women. All the different components of the communities need to be involved. The report clearly highlights the fact that there are many men and boys who are against the practice of FGMC. In certain countries, actually, men are more likely to oppose the continuation of female genital mutilation and cutting than women. And the same can be said about younger generation as opposed to older women and men. Younger people are more likely to oppose the continuation of female genital mutilation and cutting. So we have to give these young people and men the opportunity to voice their opposition to the practice.
And Claudia, I just want to be clear here. You know, in the West, you know, you have to talk about, people talk about circumcision, and there are perceived medical benefits in being, say, circumcised. Yet in the case of female genital mutilation, it has been proven there is zero medical benefit. Is that correct? There is zero reason medically to engage in this practice.
It is correct. Female genital mutilation or cutting has no medical benefits. It's a practice that originates from a form of gender discrimination, has nothing to do with health or health considerations.
I want to ask you, you know, we associate this problem, obviously, with Africa, parts of Africa, say Somalia, Sudan, Mali, parts of the Middle East, as I said in the beginning. But it's also prevalent in Western Europe. A lot of parents will send their daughters overseas, and if they can't afford to do that, there are even practitioners who come to Europe to do this. I want to quickly play for our viewers a quote from a young woman. She's French, of Senegalese parents. This is a report that France 24 did in 2009, and she was sent to Senegal to be mutilated, to be cut. Here's what she told us at the time.
Bon, ça a été très difficile à vivre, et je sais que j'étais pas toute seule, donc c'est encore pire quand on se voit sa petite cousine passer avant. Plein de sang, on ne sait même pas ce qui se passe, et puis après, on vous arrache les vêtements, on vous tient à quatre, chaque partie de votre corps, et puis qu'il y ait une personne qui s'approche avec une lame et qui on a beau crier à l'aide, rien.
Claudia, that's one of many cases, perhaps tens of thousands in the UK, many in France. This FGM is a criminal offense on the books in France and the UK, and yet it continues. Why?
Again, because women feel compelled to comply with their tradition. We do have anecdotal evidence, as you rightly said, that the practice continued to exist even in Europe and North America. Unfortunately, we do not have solid statistics about how many girls undergo this practice, because it's done in condition of illegality, and in most cases happens when girls, during vacation time, for instance, school holidays, are sent back to the country of origin. And this is when the practice is taking place. It's also true that we have anecdotal evidence that is done even in Europe and in North America in condition of illegality. Again, it's a social obligation. Obviously, migrant population feel less compelled than population in the country of origin to continue the practice, but it's still done, it's still the case.
And in Africa, just to be clear here, there are many countries, I think over 20 to date, that have actually outlawed this practice. There are 53 countries, right, in Africa, but I think over 20 have outlawed it.
This is correct. We have 24 countries out of the 29 countries covered by the report that have adopted some sort of legislation against the practice of female genital mutilation. And legislation is indeed very important, but is insufficient in itself to promote an end to the practice. Actually, in some contexts where legislation is in effect and the legislation has not been linked to changes in the way people think about FGMC, the legislation might have even an adverse effect, because it might push the practice into condition of illegality, for instance, and which might create additional danger for the girls.
You could, I guess, I'm sorry, you can liken that, I guess, to the abortion debate in many places. By outlawing it, you push it underground, you make it more dangerous because of the way it's practiced. You know, I said in the beginning, Claudia, this has been going on for centuries, female genital mutilation. It wasn't yesterday that it began. It's tempting for, say, our audience to look at this and say, this is so old, it's going to keep on going on. You can't just wipe it out, maybe not overnight. But your report suggests you'd be surprised how relatively quickly you can eliminate the practice entirely.
Absolutely. The report contains some very good news. In countries like Kenya, for instance, girls aged 15 to 19 are 3 times less likely to have undergone the procedure compared to their mothers, compared to women aged 45 to 49. And important progress has also been achieved in other countries, including, for instance, Central African Republic, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and to a lesser extent, obviously, in other countries like Egypt, for instance, where the practice continue to be almost universal, still younger generation are less likely to have undergone female genital mutilation and cutting.
Less likely, I just want to bring in that figure again, less likely, yet the report underlines still 30 million, 3 million a year, girls and women, are still at risk over the next decade.
This is a big number, but obviously we have to think about how even bigger the number of women who have already been cut is. It is more than 125 million. So it is a practice that has been in existence in centuries, but the data confirm that, again, in countries like Kenya, in certain communities where the practice used to be universal, has now disappeared. And when I say now, I say 30 to 35 years after. So it is possible to promote the abandonment of the practice in 3 to 4 decades. For some people, this might sound like a very long time, but is nothing compared to centuries of this practice being in existence.
Claudia Cappa, let's end it on that positive note. A practice centuries-old, female genital mutilation. New UNICEF report basically warns, yes, the risk is very much still there. Millions of girls and women still at risk of being cut, having their genitals cut. Yet, given the right resources and given public airing to the fact that there are more and more people opposed to the practice, it is something that can be eliminated in the next decades, if not in the next years. Thank you very much for joining us from New York. And thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.